In the depths of time, before Earth's first dawn, the galaxy burned with war. Ancient empires clashed in battles that spanned across the stars. The mighty Lyrans faced the relentless Draconians in a war that reshaped the heavens. The Orion Wars ignited, an interdimensional struggle for control of the very gateways of the cosmos. And on the worlds of Mars and Maldek, civilizations rose, only to fall in fire and ruin. These are not just myths. They are the hidden chronicles of our universe. This is the saga of power, betrayal, and survival. This is Galactic Wars. In the beginning, there was only light. Not light as we know it, not photons or flames, but a radiant essence, carrying consciousness itself. These luminous currents danced across the cosmos, each a stream of infinite awareness, all-knowing, all-encompassing, limitless. And yet, they longed for something more, a feeling, a touch, the taste of experience. Though they knew everything, they had felt nothing. So the great unfolding began. In the higher dimensions, consciousness took form. Light shaped itself into radiant vessels, ethereal bodies of geometry and intention. Thus were born the first light beings, entities who could create with thought, move with will, and explore reality through divine imagination. They painted galaxies in motion. They sculpted entire realms in the astral, paradises woven from frequency, beauty, and harmony. But still, something was missing. For all their mastery, they lacked the senses of the physical, the weight of touch, the spark of pain, the warmth of love. They could conjure illusion, but not immersion. And so, the longing deepened. Consciousness desired to descend, not to fall, but to embody, to bring light into form, to know itself through the physical. The astral realm was the first experiment, but now a greater dream stirred. To create a physical universe as vibrant and alive as the astral, where divine consciousness could walk, feel, love, and remember. And thus began the first galactic experiment, a bold journey into density, a sacred descent into matter. The light was ready to become flesh. Eons ago, long before Earth knew form, a collective of etheric, non-physical beings crossed the Antares Stargate into the Milky Way. Their mission? To ignite a cosmic experiment, the birth of embodied consciousness. The chosen cradle for this divine endeavor was the star system of Lyra, a realm of radiant suns and fertile planets, ideal for nurturing physical life. Here, the first great lineages were formed. The felines were the first to descend, majestic and wise, with feline features and humanoid forms. They embodied strength, nobility, and guardianship, becoming the original planetary stewards of Lyra. Soon after came the avians, the second founder race, ethereal beings with bird-like features and a gift for vision and higher perception. They brought knowledge, movement, and song into the structure of civilization. Together, these two ancient races initiated a sacred process of genetic refinement. Through countless iterations of biological and soul-level engineering, they brought forth a new species, the Adamic human, the progenitor of all humanoid races in the galaxy. These early humans were diverse in form and frequency. Some bore white, Nordic-like features. Others had blue skin, red hair, or radiant platinum blonde hues. Yet all carried within them the same divine blueprint, the potential to embody both physical mastery and spiritual light. They settled on the lush worlds of Vega, Avion, Avalon, Apex, Bila, Tekka, and Meroc, planets teeming with life, harmony, and abundance. There, they cultivated advanced agriculture, developed crystalline technologies, and lived in resonance with cosmic law and planetary rhythms. For over 40 million years, the Lyran humans thrived. Their societies were models of unity, peaceful, cooperative, and spiritually attuned. They lived not in opposition to nature, but as an extension of it. But as is often true across the great tapestries of time, peace shines like a beacon, and where there is light, shadows follow. The flourishing of Lyra drew attention. From the void beyond the stars, something was watching, something ancient, something hungry. And thus, the story of Lyra would soon take a darker turn. In the shadowy reaches of the Draco constellation, a force of ancient darkness began to take root. These were the Draconians, a ruthless race exiled from another universe. After unleashing devastation on a cosmic scale, they were forcibly removed by the beings they had warred with and deposited here in Draco like cosmic outcasts. Cold-blooded and hyper-intelligent, the Draconians aligned themselves with separation and domination. Service to self was their creed. They were not just conquerors, they were master geneticists. Wherever they went, they created laboratories, across galaxies, across time, breeding hybrids and lesser versions of themselves to serve their will. At the root of their lineage was a fearsome race known as the Kiakar, and their society was structured in a strict genetic caste system. At the top were the dragons, the ancient winged beings that echo through Earth's oldest myths. Towering and reclusive, these entities were not inherently evil, but utterly unpredictable. They walked the line between light and dark, neutral forces who observed more than interfered. Beneath them stood the warrior caste, known in Earth legend as the Lizzies. 8 feet tall, bipedal, with thick green scales and gator-like jaws, these reptilians were built for war. Physically dominant, intellectually advanced, strategically merciless. And in their culture, it was not the males, but the females who ruled, commanding the armies, issuing orders, controlling the future. At the height of their expansion, the Draconians were multiplying at an astonishing rate. Their population surge was so rapid, it forced a leap in their technology. They developed interstellar travel, not for exploration, but for extraction. To survive, they needed resources, and to dominate, they needed reach. The Alpha Draconians were the first race in our galaxy to master faster-than-light travel, and they've possessed that capability for nearly 4 billion years. They became cosmic nomads, moving from star system to star system, harvesting what they needed, abandoning what they didn't, never settling, never satisfied, just consuming worlds, moons, civilizations. Then it happened. Approximately 572 million years ago, in our current timeline, several massive draconian ships pierced the skies of the Lyran star system. One colossal vessel descended, and from it, reptilian beings from Alpha Draconis emerged. What they saw astonished them. Lyran planets were paradise, lush ecosystems, rich soils, abundant food, vast oceans, thriving life. To the Draconians, it was more than a marvel. It was an opportunity. Their own worlds had long since turned barren, stripped of sustenance by eons of overuse. But here, in Lyra was everything they lacked: water, vegetation, energy, genetic diversity, and most of all, a young race, the Lyrans, who lacked the weapons or suspicion to defend it. Still, the Draconians knew brute force wasn't their only tool. They were cunning, and the Chiakar, their dominant caste, were especially aggressive and strategic. So they approached the Lyrans under the guise of diplomacy. They offered a treaty, a trade, advanced Draco technology in exchange for access to the resources of Lyra. The Lyrans, spiritual and curious, were intrigued. They had never known war, never known deception. They welcomed their visitors, hoping to learn and perhaps evolve. They allowed the Draconians to land, to walk their worlds, to study their systems. And that's when the trap was set. The reptilians mapped the Lyrans' planetary layouts, noting every weakness, every unprotected corridor of energy, every blind spot in their defense. Then, they attacked. In a wave of coordinated strikes, Draconian forces ambushed 14 Lyran planets. No warning, no declaration, just annihilation. The peaceful Lyrans, farmers, artists, builders, had no military. They had no weapons, no strategy for defense, only confusion and devastation. Bila, Tekka, Merak, Avion, Avalon, all gone. Their cities reduced to ash, their people massacred. Over 50 million Lyran souls were lost. It was more than genocide. It was the moment the Draconians first tasted human flesh and wanted more. They began to see humanity not as fellow beings, but as resources, as food, as labor, as breeding stock. Lyran prisoners were used as slaves, both for work and for breeding experiments. Some were taken as sex slaves, others for genetic manipulation. And from that moment on, the war between humans and reptilians was no longer about territory. It became a spiritual war, of essence, of sovereignty, of survival. The Lyran-Draconian War had begun, and its echoes would ripple across galaxies for millions of years to come. It was the Draconian assault that shattered the golden age of Lyra. Entire worlds were wiped out in moments, and those who survived had only one option: escape. Fleeing the inferno, the Lyrans launched massive evacuation efforts. Their once unified civilization fractured, splintering across the galaxy in search of safety. The trauma was immense, but so was their will to survive. Most of the Lyran refugees, especially those from the central systems, found sanctuary in the Pleiades and the Andromeda Galaxy. Meanwhile, those from Vega, a key star within Lyra, journeyed outward toward Sirius and Orion, two systems that would become major cradles of human evolution. But Lyra's descendants didn't stop there. They spread far and wide, to Deneb and Cygnus, to Cassiopeia, Altair, Procyon, and beyond. The galaxy became their canvas and their classroom. They were no longer just settlers. They became nomads, pioneers, and survivors. On board colossal ships, they learned to grow their own food in zero gravity. They searched relentlessly for ice, minerals, fertile planets, and sustainable orbits. Where they landed, they adapted, stabilizing planetary systems using their advanced energy technologies. They constructed domes on moons, mined asteroids for metals, and built orbital habitats to harness starlight. To do all this, they had to evolve, quickly. In exile, they became engineers, terraformers, and builders of civilizations. Their technology flourished under pressure, and with it, their resilience. This is why, even now, so many ruins and anomalies litter the moons and planets of our own solar system, echoes of ancient Lyran colonies that once reached this far. But above all, there was one resource more precious than any other: water. Humans are water-based beings. Without it, survival was impossible. The Lyrans, desperate for hydration, sought out comets, ice-rich moons, and even hollowed-out asteroids filled with frozen water. In fact, one Lyran group reportedly hid inside a massive ice asteroid, using its frozen reservoirs not only to survive, but to rebuild their identity in secret. But their enemies knew this weakness. The Draconians, cold and calculating, realized that water was humanity's lifeline and turned it into a weapon. They deployed massive battleships to block access to water worlds across key sectors. They monitored star maps, charting every system where liquid water was abundant, and waited. Any Lyran fleet approaching these systems would be ambushed. Water became a battleground. A war of attrition unfolded, not just of bodies and blood, but of resources and endurance. To counter this, human survivors from Lyra developed innovative technologies to extract water from comets, ice fields, and atmospheric condensates, pioneering survival strategies under pressure. What began as a desperate retreat evolved into a saga of adaptation and rebirth. Because even in exile, the light of Lyra refused to fade. From the wreckage of Lyra, new civilizations began to rise. The Pleiades became a central haven. Its bright stars, especially Tegeta, Era, and Electra, offered the right frequencies for healing and regeneration. Here, the Lyran survivors planted the seeds of a new human lineage. These weren't just refugee camps, they were laboratories of evolution. In the Pleiades, the humans focused on inner harmony, spiritual advancement, and peaceful cooperation. They preserved the original teachings of Lyra: love, creativity, and cosmic balance. These starborn societies would later become known as the Pleiadian Alliance, a civilization rooted in light, wisdom, and remembrance. Meanwhile, in the Sirius system, especially around Sirius A and Sirius B, Vega's descendants began integrating with other star beings, including aquatic and cetacean species. Sirius became a crucible of diversity. Here, humans evolved alongside other advanced life forms: dolphins, whales, and other aquatic intelligences who carried great memory from earlier cycles. This fusion gave rise to the Sirian mystery schools, where knowledge of sound, vibration, and energy healing flourished. The Sirians became the cosmic alchemists, turning pain into wisdom and trauma into sacred science. But it was Orion that told a different story. There, the exiled humans encountered not just opportunity, but deep conflict. Orion had long been a contested territory, a battleground between forces of light and shadow. Lyran refugees who settled here found themselves caught between draconian outposts and native civilizations already aligned with the dark polarity. It was in Orion that the inner war intensified, not just in the stars, but within the soul. Some fell to the lure of power. Others held their light, forming rebel alliances and spiritual enclaves. Out of this tension, Orion became a mirror, a multidimensional stage where the duality seated in Lyra now played out on a galactic scale. But even amid darkness, humanity endured. From the peace of the Pleiades, the wisdom of Sirius, and the fires of Orion, humanity began to remember itself. Their civilizations rose and fell, but the essence endured: the Lyran blueprint, the divine spark, the encoded memory of paradise lost, and the will to reclaim it. And so, the great diaspora of Lyra was no longer just about survival. It became a journey of becoming, a test of who we are and who we were always meant to be. As the galaxy reshaped itself in the aftermath of war, a new planet came into focus, Earth, a young, fertile world positioned along key stargates, rich in water, vibrant with life, perfect for settlement, and perfect for manipulation. To the Lyran descendants, Earth was seen as a sanctuary, a new beginning, a world where the pain of the past might be healed. They came in waves, from Sirius, Orion, and the Pleiades, bringing with them knowledge, seeds, technology, and memory. These early star visitors didn't come to conquer. They came to seed life and to steward evolution. They introduced DNA codes, biodiversity, agriculture, and structures of sacred geometry. Many of the ancient megalithic sites on Earth, still misunderstood today, carry their imprint. Humanity, in its current form, began as a hybrid project, a sacred blend of Lyran, Sirian, Orion, and even Andromedan lineages. A divine experiment to create a being that could hold the light while grounded in matter. But Earth's neutrality made it a battleground, because the Draconians never left. While the Lyran starseeds built above, the reptilian agenda slithered beneath. Through genetic infiltration, manipulation of belief systems, and control of power structures, the Draconians found a foothold. They whispered into the minds of kings. They embedded themselves in ancient empires. They erected false hierarchies and fed on fear. The war that began in Lyra was now being fought on Earth. But unlike before, this battle wasn't only in the skies. It was happening within consciousness itself. Every human soul became a microcosm of that great war, light or dark, unity or control, creation or conquest. And yet, through it all, the Lyran spark endured. In the myths of gods descending from the stars, in the teachings of oneness across ancient cultures, in the dreams that echo a home among the stars, the memory was never lost, just sleeping. And now, as Earth enters a new cycle, that memory is awakening again. The time has come to remember who we are, not just children of Earth, but descendants of the stars. Today, Earth is more than just a planet. It is a cosmic crossroads, a nexus of dimensions, agendas, and ancient legacies. The Lyran-Draconian War never ended. It simply changed form. Where once starships clashed in the skies, now it plays out in minds, systems, and souls. The battle is psychological, energetic, spiritual. You feel it. The tension between love and fear, freedom and control, light and shadow. That's no accident, because the same forces that once tore galaxies apart still linger here. Some hide in the shadows of governments, finance, and belief. Others guide from higher realms, unseen but not absent. The draconian influence still feeds on division, disempowerment, forgetfulness. They manipulate through media, dogma, distraction. Their goal? To keep humanity asleep, disconnected from its divine origins. But they are not the only force at work. The Lyran soul spark lives on, in every human being who chooses truth, in every act of compassion, in every seeker who looks beyond the veil and remembers. This planet is activating. Across the world, people are waking up to their origins, their power, their purpose. They are reclaiming the ancient codes buried in their DNA. 12 strands, once dormant, beginning to sing again. They are starseeds, old souls, healers, warriors, dreamers. You may be one of them. And so, the great question returns. The same question that echoed across Lyra and still echoes now. Will we repeat the cycle or rise as creators once more? Because this time, the war is not fought with weapons. It is fought through awareness. The battlefield is consciousness, and the choice is yours. The stars remember. Do you? In the vast and ancient history of the universe, few events have left as deep a scar across the stars as the Orion Wars. We've all heard fragments of the story, of epic battles among the stars, of advanced civilizations at odds, and of how these cosmic conflicts shaped not just distant galaxies, but our very existence here on Earth. Yet behind the legends lies a deeper mystery, one rarely spoken aloud. How did it truly begin? And why? The answer is far more enigmatic than war or politics. It began with a question, a temptation, a bold cosmic experiment, the deliberate invocation of darkness. Not evil, but the unknown. Not destruction, but contrast. An experiment meant to explore the furthest edges of free will and consciousness. And once set in motion, it would ignite a chain reaction that no star system would escape. In the beginning, there was only light. It flowed like a living river across the universe, pure, eternal, and all-knowing. It was the source of all things, the breath of the Creator, and those who were born of it swam effortlessly within its infinite grace. They were told they were divine, radiant, the most beautiful expressions of existence itself. And they believed it, because they had never known anything else. But over time, a sacred question arose within the light. If all I have ever known is light, how do I truly know what light is? Without contrast, how can one see? Without darkness, how can one understand the brilliance of the flame? So, some of the beings of light, out of divine curiosity and an unshakable desire to know themselves more deeply, chose to embark on a path that had never been walked. They began to fragment, to distort their frequencies, stepping away from unity and into duality. Thus began the descent, not as rebellion, but as revelation. Among them, one being stood out above the rest. His name was Lucifer, which means bearer of light. He was not the villain of creation, but one of its most radiant expressions. Yet he longed for a deeper knowing. He volunteered to take the ultimate plunge into separation, into shadow, into forgetfulness, so that through contrast, the light might rediscover itself. Lucifer's fall was not a fall from grace, but a sacred offering, the initiation of the cosmic experiment of darkness. Through his journey, a divine paradox was set into motion, one that would ripple across dimensions, birthing choice, free will, and the potential for transformation. For it is only in the deepest darkness that the brightest light can be revealed. After Lucifer's descent, the ripples of duality began spreading across the cosmos. The great experiment had only just begun. One of the first arenas of this unfolding drama was the Lyran star system, a peaceful cradle of creation nestled within the Milky Way. To initiate the descent from pure energy into denser, more physical forms, a group of highly advanced, non-physical beings traveled from the Andromeda galaxy, guided by a divine mandate. Their mission: to seed a new form of life, one that could embody both the light of its origins and the density of the physical realm. From this sacred task emerged the Lyrans, the first humanoid race in our galaxy. The Lyrans carried within them the codes of higher consciousness, ready to explore a reality governed by contrast and choice. But the experiment of light could not unfold without its counterpart. In a mysterious act of cosmic design, or perhaps divine paradox, the Elohim, architects of form and frequency, introduced another race into the unfolding galactic story. Not of light, but of shadow. Not cooperative, but service to self. They were the Draconians, a powerful reptilian species, cold-blooded, ancient, and fierce. Outcasts from another universe, they had sown destruction in their former realm and were exiled to this one, a cosmic problem child placed in the Draco constellation. Where the Lyrans were builders, dreamers, and explorers of light, the Draconians were conquerors, driven by domination, conquest, and survival through control. They thrived on the raw power of fear, of subjugation, of war. At first, the Lyrans, still young in their development, continued to cultivate their societies, unaware of the storm approaching. But the Draconians had set their gaze upon the Lyran planets, rich in natural resources, thriving in harmony, and vulnerable. Then, the invasion began. Several Lyran worlds fell under brutal attack. Cities were destroyed, temples of wisdom razed to the ground. The peaceful Lyrans, unprepared for war, were forced to flee. Alongside their allies, the Vegans, they scattered across the stars, planting the seeds of future civilizations in the Pleiades, Orion, Sirius, and beyond. This was the first great galactic war between light and dark. A war not only of weapons, but of ideologies. A war that would echo through thousands of star systems and millions of years. But this was only the beginning. The Draconian invasion of Lyra was not just a battle for territory. It was the opening act of a much greater conflict. A shadow was rising, and in its depths, the Orion Wars were waiting. At the dawn of time, when the great pulse of the Big Bang echoed across the void, something extraordinary happened. Portals, gateways of light scattered throughout the stars, formed as bridges between dimensions. These were sacred passageways, divine instruments designed to connect time, consciousness, and creation itself. Through these portals, information could flow freely across timelines and realities. They were the veins of the universe, carrying the lifeblood of source energy through the fabric of space-time. Among them, one portal stood above all others, the Orion portal. Situated in the heart of the Orion constellation, this colossal energetic gateway is the largest and most significant in our galaxy, a cosmic axis, a divine key. Its three primary stars, Alnitak, Alnilam, and Mintaka, align perfectly to represent the past, present, and future. Together, they form a bridge through time itself, offering access to every dimension and every moment ever to exist. But hidden within this majestic triad is a deeper secret. To contact the divine, to reach the ninth dimension, the realm of God itself, one must enter the center of the Orion portal. This central spot, symbolizing the eternal present, is the only gateway that leads beyond time. Those who reach this sacred center do not arrive in a place, but in a void, a realm of nothingness, no time, no space. And from this void, one may merge with the divine, and even birth new realities, new universes. But such a journey demands tremendous energy, intention, and spiritual maturity. and not all were willing to wait. In the Pleiades star system, a group of fifth-dimensional beings, highly advanced, luminous, and wise, grew restless. Their evolution had stalled. Though dwelling in higher consciousness, they longed to ascend to the sixth dimension. But the path was not easy. For beings of the fifth dimension, the only way to move forward was through interaction with the third dimension. Evolution, it turns out, is interdependent. The pace of growth in the lower realms directly affects ascension in the higher ones. And for many Pleiadians, the third dimensional experience, dense, slow, bound by time, was excruciatingly sluggish. What feels like 1,000 years to us might be mere days to them. And so, they waited and grew impatient. To accelerate the process, some turned to an ancient truth. Darkness is a catalyst. In the absence of contrast, there is no growth. So, in order to spark spiritual evolution on Earth and across the third dimension, darkness was introduced. Not as punishment, but as a sacred pressure, a divine friction through which souls awaken. But still, it was not enough. In desperation, a group of ambitious Pleiadians reached out to unlikely allies, the Draconians. Cold, calculating, and deeply rooted in the service to self path, the Draconians had their own desires: power, control, and the manipulation of energy across the galaxy. An alliance was formed in secret. Their shared goal: to bypass the natural evolutionary process and force their way into the ninth dimension. They believed that by taking control of the Orion portal, they could hijack the cosmic system, rewrite the rules, and create a new universe, one sculpted in their own image, governed by their will. And so began the Great Conflict. The Orion constellation, once a symbol of cosmic balance, became a battleground. Light and dark clashed in realms both physical and etheric. The Orion Wars had begun. Not just a war of weapons, but a war of timelines, intentions, and soul evolution. And through this chaos, the future of countless star systems, including our own, would be decided. Long before the Orion Wars ignited, long before the darkness began its spiral through the stars, there was a sacred alliance, an ancient species entrusted with one of the most powerful energies in the universe. Between the Andromeda Galaxy and our own Milky Way, a bridge of cosmic communication once flowed, a river of time, space, and divine intelligence. At the center of this connection stood a mysterious race known as the Trevet. Towering over 5 meters tall, adorned with majestic horns that rose like antennae toward the heavens, the Trevet were not warriors. They were guardians of light, caretakers of what we on Earth know only as Proticta, a sacred energy beyond human comprehension. Proticta is not merely a force. It is the living frequency of interdimensional travel, a vibrational key that unlocks the boundaries between the third and sixth dimensions. Using their mastery of sacred geometry, the Trevet created a powerful field through the Merkaba, a divine, star-shaped vehicle of light. This Merkaba was more than a symbol. It was a technology, a stargate, capable of transporting beings to the very core of reality, to other dimensions, other galaxies, and even alternate timelines. The Trevet generously offered this wisdom to advanced civilizations across the stars. But with it came responsibility. They remained the keepers of the stargates, the silent stewards of a delicate balance. But not all honored the sacred. The Draconians, with their insatiable hunger for power, sought to exploit this energy for their own ends. They knew that if they could harness Producta, they could manipulate portals at will, bend time, alter dimensions, and ultimately gain control over the Orion portal itself. But such a feat required immense energy, far beyond what a single star or planet could provide. And so, they began to invade. World after world fell under their shadow, not for conquest alone, but for resources. Deep within certain planets were rare minerals capable of storing and amplifying stellar energy. These materials, when refined, could reflect and channel the frequency of the Orion suns, allowing the Draconians to mimic the energy pattern of the Producta and build machines powerful enough to tear open the fabric of reality. But they did not act alone. They allied with a species known as the Iacopti, interdimensional hunters and extractors of energy. The Iacopti specialized in locating these sacred materials, stripping them from planetary cores, and delivering them to the Draconians. Entire civilizations were obliterated, not in anger, but in cold, calculated precision, all for the raw materials needed to construct a dimensional weapon. And still, it was not enough. The Draconians discovered an even more potent energy source, the human soul. Each soul carries a unique vibrational pattern, an energetic reservoir stored within the chakras. These spinning wheels of light were like miniature suns, containing frequencies of pure source energy. And so began one of the darkest chapters of the experiment. The Draconians approached humans, offering them power, fame, wealth, in exchange for something far more valuable, their souls, and many accepted. This is the origin of the age-old myth, selling your soul to the devil. But it was no myth. Once an agreement was made, one of two things would occur. The human soul could be extracted, drained like a battery, or replaced entirely. In some cases, a reptilian soul would be implanted into the body, allowing the Draconians to operate directly in the third dimension, often in positions of influence and control. This manipulation wasn't just physical, it was spiritual warfare. Every soul taken, every mineral harvested, every planet lost, brought the Draconians closer to their goal, to seize the Orion portal, ascend artificially to the ninth dimension, and create a new universe, one ruled not by love or balance, but by control. But they were not the only ones with a plan. The guardians of the portal were watching, and the light was preparing to respond. As the cosmic experiment intensified, so did the desperation of those seeking to transcend the boundaries of their dimension. Some Pleiadians, aligned with the Draconians, believed they had discovered the only path to rapid transformation, a shortcut through the dimensional layers. To them, waiting for organic evolution was no longer an option. They had glimpsed a possible future, one where they had successfully created their own universe, a reality shaped entirely by their desires and control. But to reach that future, they needed power. And the Draconians, masters of resource extraction and energetic manipulation, were their chosen tools. Secretly, these Pleiadians began guiding the Draconians toward the Orion portal, exploiting their aggression while siphoning energy for their own use. In exchange, they offered the Draconians access to ancient knowledge and dimensional technologies they could not obtain alone. Together, they formed a delicate but dangerous alliance. To destabilize the guardianship of the portal, the Pleiadians seeded disinformation within Orion. They warned that certain Orion factions were conspiring to open the portal to the 9 Lords of Darkness, mysterious and powerful forces representing 9 galactic systems capable of both creating and destroying entire realities. If the Orion portal were to open to these entities, the very structure of our galaxy could be hijacked. Matter would no longer be guided by balance, but by chaos. It would be like tearing open a tunnel between the sixth and third dimensions, unleashing low vibrational entities into the material realm. Entities that could mutate, manipulate, and unravel the physical plane from within. Panic spread like wildfire. The once unified Orion civilization fractured. Civil war erupted, not over territory, but over truth. Who was right? Who had betrayed the portal? Who was secretly working with the Draconians? Amidst the chaos, no one was left to guard the gateway. The portal, meant to be a sacred axis connecting time, space, and divine consciousness, became a battlefield. And in the shadows, the Draconians and the rogue Pleiadians advanced their agenda unnoticed. This internal conflict divided Orion into two major factions. One side, seduced or infiltrated by Draconian influence, joined forces with the Negative Alliance. They sought power, survival, or escape. The others, Orion still devoted to the path of light and balance, refused to participate in the corruption. Many of them fled their home system, traveling to other stars and planets where they could continue their mission in peace, far from the growing darkness. Thus, Orion, once a cradle of celestial knowledge, fell into shadow. It became a stronghold for negative forces, a launch point for invasions and dimensional manipulation. The Draconians, rogue Pleiadians, and dark-aligned Orions formed a triad of power, initiating a series of galactic wars that tore through the fabric of civilizations. Planets fell, portals were seized, beings were enslaved, or worse, used. These wars were not only for territory, they were for control over souls, over reality, over the very future of this galaxy. And though millennia have passed, the war between light and dark never truly ended. It continues, even now, through systems, timelines, and lifetimes. Because the true battle is not just among the stars, it is within us. As the Orion Wars raged on, tearing star systems apart and shaking the balance of the galaxy, an urgent call echoed across the heavens. We must preserve the knowledge. We must bring it to Earth. This call came from the Galactic Confederation and a specialized group of beings known as the Galactic Agriculturalists, cosmic stewards from the Orion constellation. These were not farmers in the traditional sense, but keepers of galactic memory, tasked with seeking out young, awakening worlds and planting the seeds of knowledge in case catastrophe wiped civilizations away. They were guardians of legacy, and Earth, then known as Anglusaha, had become their next mission. The agriculturalists were striking beings, towering at nearly twice the height of an average human. They possessed humanoid forms, but bore heart-shaped heads, reminiscent of Earth's ants, with ant-like eyes and delicate human-like mouths. Their skin shimmered like scales and shifted color in response to the sun, a reflection of their connection to nature and light. Sensing Earth's potential, some of these beings made a profound sacrifice. They willingly left their dimension, choosing to be reborn in the third dimension, to become the information itself. Through this incarnation, they would teach future humans how to awaken the energy seated within their own bodies, particularly through the chakra system, the spiritual energy centers that, when activated, serve as gateways to cosmic memory and interdimensional healing. But they were not alone. In a coordinated effort, the Galactic Confederation initiated a sacred mission, the seeding of humanity. This monumental task involved the cooperation of several advanced star nations, the Arcturians, Sirians, Pleiadians, Vegans, and Orions, among others. But this time, they would do something different, something never done before. They would merge the genetic material of 22 extraterrestrial races, including those who had long been at war: Lyrans and reptilians, Pleiadians and Draconians, Sirians and Orions. Races once locked in galactic conflict would now coexist within a single being, the human. The idea was not to erase the past, but to transcend it. Humanity would become a living mirror of the galaxy, a microcosm of both light and shadow. With the bloodlines of former enemies running through our veins, war among us would no longer be external, but internal. The battlefield would shift within, because only by facing the conflict inside, by healing the ancient wounds encoded in our DNA, could we hope to break the cycle of galactic warfare. We were designed to become a harmonizing force, to resolve the karmic imprints of millions of years of interstellar conflict, to embody balance, and to show the galaxy what's possible when light and dark no longer fight, but coexist in peace. What happens on Earth is not isolated. It is a signal, a ripple. If we can find unity within, that resonance travels outward, through dimensions, through star systems, through time itself. Humanity was never just an experiment. We are part of the solution, a living hope for the end of the Orion Wars. The Orion Wars did not begin with weapons, but with a desire, an ancient hunger to ascend through the dimensions, from the outside in. Some beings, in their quest for godlike power, attempted to reach the highest realms by force. Rather than evolving inwardly, they chose to open artificial portals, hijack timelines, and conquer realities not their own. To sustain this multidimensional conquest, they needed vast amounts of energy and resources, which led to brutal invasions and interstellar war. Thus began one of the darkest epochs in galactic history. The wars raged for eons. Entire star systems fell. Civilizations were erased, and the cosmos trembled under the weight of unchecked ambition. What they had forgotten is that every dimension can be accessed from within, that the true gateway to infinity lies in the heart, not in a portal torn through space-time. But by the time this realization surfaced, it was too late. Millions of souls had perished, and many more were left shattered, trapped in endless cycles of reincarnation, returning again and again to heal the trauma etched into their spiritual memory by the Orion Wars. Earth, too, became a pivotal piece on this cosmic chessboard. Though small and young in comparison to ancient star civilizations, Earth held a rare frequency, a living library of DNA, emotion, and potential. And because of that, it became a battleground for influence. Negative forces, primarily reptilian beings aligned with service to self agendas, infiltrated Earth's energetic field and social structures. They ceded control through politics, education, economy, media, and entertainment, manipulating perception and suppressing truth. Their goal wasn't just domination, it was disconnection, to keep humanity asleep to its cosmic origins. But Earth has never been alone. The light has been watching, guiding, waiting. Because Earth is not just a world, it is a seed that, if nurtured, could blossom into the key that finally ends the ancient war. Benevolent beings from higher dimensions, Arcturians, Pleiadians, Lyrans, Andromedans, and many others, have answered the call. Not through invasion, but through subtle, sacred support, channelings, dreams, intuition, synchronicities, and acts of guardianship that whisper truth to those who are ready to listen. They remind us, the war is no longer out there, it's in here. Within each human heart lies a battlefield inherited from the stars. Conflicts of ego, duality, fear, and separation. But if we can find peace within, if we can learn to balance the light and shadow in ourselves, then that inner alchemy becomes a signal that radiates outward into the galaxy. What we do on Earth matters more than we know. When one human finds balance, 1,000 star systems feel it. When one soul forgives, timelines heal. When a collective chooses harmony, the cycle ends. So no, universal peace is not a myth. It is a destiny, and it begins with you. In the hidden chapters of our solar system's forgotten past, there are two worlds that now lie silent: Mars and Maldek. Once, these planets are believed to have been home to thriving civilizations, cultures advanced in both knowledge and technology, perhaps rivaling or even surpassing our own. Yet, according to ancient accounts, channeled teachings, and esoteric traditions, both worlds were forever changed by catastrophic conflicts. Wars of such unimaginable scale and power that they did not simply bring down empires. They altered the very fate of the planets themselves. Mars, once a vibrant world filled with flowing rivers, vast oceans, and a flourishing atmosphere, was left dry, scarred, and desolate. Its surface today bears the silent testimony of a civilization that reached great heights, but was undone by its own divisions. Maldek, a planet said to be even larger than Earth, suffered an even more tragic fate. Its people unleashed forces they could not control, tearing their world apart. What remains of Maldek now drifts through space as countless fragments, forming the asteroid belt between Mars and Jupiter. In this video, we journey into the mysteries of these long-lost worlds. We will explore the legends and uncover the hidden stories behind what has come to be known as the Mars and Maldek Wars. Throughout the history of our universe, there have always been higher groups of beings entrusted with guiding the unfolding of creation. These cosmic stewards oversee the evolution of planets and the design of life forms across countless star systems. They serve as guardians of civilizations and architects of destiny, cosmic planners working in harmony with the Creator, all in service to the one infinite Creator, with a single overarching purpose: to nurture the evolution of consciousness throughout the universe. Among these caretakers, the Elohim Collective hold a central role. As seventh density beings, their responsibility extends to the very seeding of life itself, bringing forth the sparks of consciousness that take root on planets and stars across the cosmos. Working alongside them is the Council of Planets, a body of wise overseers who design long-term evolutionary plans for worlds, monitor their progress, and introduce experiments meant to expand the possibilities of growth. Many of the great leaps in planetary evolution, including the veil of forgetfulness and the division of the brain into hemispheres, arose from such experiments, each a trial intended to test which conditions best cultivate the soul's journey back to unity. One such trial took place in the Sirius system. There, two neighboring civilizations were guided along very different paths. On one world, beings were attuned primarily to the right hemisphere of the mind, encouraged to grow through intuition, spiritual connection, and inner knowing. On the other, their counterparts were guided toward the left hemisphere, toward intellect, analysis, and the power of the ego. The outcomes could not have been more distinct. The right-brained civilization blossomed. Within only a single evolutionary cycle, they ascended into higher dimensions, their unity and inner harmony carrying them beyond the limitations of physical existence. The left-brained civilization, however, struggled. Their brilliance in analysis hardened into pride and division. The ego overshadowed spirit, leading to conflict, competition, and separation. In time, their world collapsed under the weight of its own imbalance, a cautionary tale of intellect without heart. The Council of Planets studied these results carefully. They learned much, but their work was not complete. Could there be a way to weave intellect and intuition together, bringing the sharpness of reason into balance with the wisdom of spirit? Determined to refine the experiment, they turned their attention to another world, Mars. On Mars, the design was adjusted. Beings were created with a deliberate bias, 70% toward the left hemisphere, with the remaining 30% reserved for intuition and inner guidance. The hope was that this blend would produce a civilization of brilliance and balance, a people who could harness the power of intellect while still remaining anchored in wisdom. But Mars, too, fell into shadow. The Martian people became extraordinary in their sciences, mastering technology and the art of war. Yet as their intellect grew, their inner compass weakened. Intuition was overshadowed, spirit forgotten. Their achievements fed their pride, and their weapons fueled their conflicts. In time, the brilliance that was meant to elevate them turned inward, consuming their world. Mars was scarred and left barren, a civilization undone by its own imbalance. Around 225 million years ago, Mars was a world far different from the barren desert we see today. It was a planet alive with vitality, capable of nurturing life and supporting the long journey of consciousness through its evolutionary stages. From the very first expressions of existence, the raw elements, minerals, and forces of nature, Mars evolved steadily, layer upon layer, until higher densities of life emerged. In time, it became a fertile ground where consciousness could flourish, even reaching into the realms of fourth density awareness. Mars was home to an abundance of life forms, elements, rocks, plants, animals, and eventually humanoid beings, mirroring the evolutionary pattern we now recognize on Earth. In fact, in its earliest ages, Mars and Earth were nearly twins, seeded by the same great cosmic architects who scattered the seeds of life across the universe. Mars's ecosystems reflected Earth so closely that they once hosted nearly identical species: mammals, reptiles, amphibians, insects, birds, and even massive dinosaur-like creatures that roamed its lands. By some accounts, nearly 80% of the life that now thrives on Earth first walked, swam, or flew across ancient Mars. The earliest beings to stride across Martian soil were enormous primate-like creatures, towering, powerful forms resembling the legends of Bigfoot and Sasquatch from Earth's folklore. These beings acted as guardians of the land, protectors of the planet's balance. They lived in harmony with nature, building simple communities, sharing resources, and honoring the cycles of life. Surrounding them, Mars was vibrant. vast oceans teeming with dolphins, whales, sharks, and shimmering coral reefs, skies filled with winged creatures, landscapes alive with diversity and abundance. But the story of Mars soon took a dramatic turn. Visitors from the stars arrived, advanced travelers with purpose. They intermingled with the native primates, blending their essence to create hybrid beings. These new forms were tall, elongated in frame, with smooth faces and skin tones that resembled those of Earth's Aboriginal and Asian peoples. From this merging arose three distinct humanoid subraces, each spreading across different regions of the Martian world. They built colonies, adapted to the varying climates, and gave rise to flourishing societies. As time passed, Martian civilization advanced. Their technologies grew ever more sophisticated, and their mastery of science expanded rapidly. Yet with progress came danger. Mars caught the attention of powerful negative forces, beings from Orion and the Draconian empires. These entities descended upon the planet, conducting genetic manipulations and offering technologies designed not for enlightenment, but for conquest and destruction. They seduced the Martians with promises of power, turning their brilliance toward weapons and domination. What began as a world of balance and potential was slowly led into shadow. The Martians, once a people of harmony and vision, became entangled in conflict and corruption. Thus, a dark chapter unfolded upon Mars, one that would ultimately reshape the destiny of the planet and its people forever. After the Martians established their civilization, they inevitably drew the attention of outside forces, most notably the Draconians and the Orions. These advanced but negatively oriented beings saw Mars as an opportunity. The Draconians, in particular, offered the Martians advanced technology, but their exchange came at a cost. In return, they demanded genetic material. Through this bargain, they engineered a hybrid race known as the Mardukos, a people designed with the traits of conquest, domination, and unchecked pride. These hybrids were powerful, but they were also deeply self-centered and warlike, serving the interests of their draconian creators. Around 27 million years ago, Mars reached a critical turning point that would forever alter its destiny. For countless ages, the red planet had been a fertile ground for the growth of life and the unfolding of consciousness. Its civilizations had thrived, exploring both spirituality and technology. But the draconian intervention set into motion a struggle that transcended Mars itself, a struggle for the very direction of consciousness in that part of the galaxy. The arrival of the Mardukos fractured Martian society. Where once there had been unity and balance, now there was division. The native Martians sought harmony and spiritual growth, but the hybrids embodied aggression and the hunger for power. Their very existence tilted the planet toward polarity, and soon, conflict ignited. What began as tension over resources and governance escalated into a catastrophic war. But this was no ordinary conflict. It was a battle for the soul of the planet. Both sides unleashed technologies of staggering power, weapons capable of reshaping the surface of Mars itself. The Martians, desperate to defend their world, pushed their sciences to extremes. The Mardukos, driven by conquest, sought complete domination. The results were devastating beyond imagination. Mars, once alive with oceans, forests, and skies, was torn apart. Its atmosphere was stripped away, its waters boiled into the void, and its vibrant ecosystems collapsed into barren rock and dust. The biosphere that had nurtured consciousness for millions of years was gone in the span of a war. Survivors of the catastrophe were few. Some Martians fled deep underground, building hidden sanctuaries where life could continue. Others looked to the stars. Many among the Martian Council made the fateful decision to journey to Earth, bringing with them the sacred task of seeding a new world. On Earth, they began their great work anew. They refined and adjusted the physical blueprint, creating the form that would one day become the human vehicle, an instrument capable of carrying the lessons of Mars, while also holding the potential for greater balance and spiritual awakening. Thus, from the ashes of Mars, the seeds of humanity were sown. Fueled by the lingering influence of the Orion forces, the Martians descended into bitter internal wars that tore their world apart. A deep division arose between two factions: those who remained spiritually aligned, seeking harmony with the cosmic order, and those who had succumbed to the allure of negative energies, driven by ambition, pride, and desire for control. This struggle intensified over millennia, escalating into a full-scale conflict that ultimately rendered Mars uninhabitable, a world no longer able to sustain life or nurture the evolution of consciousness. Amid this cataclysm, the Guardians of Mars, a coalition led by the Elohim Collective and councils from countless planetary spheres, intervened. They constructed a vast interstellar vessel, a sanctuary of safety and preservation, designed to carry the survivors of light beyond the doom of their world. Into this mothership were gathered the souls of those Martians who had remained aligned with the higher path, sparing them the cycle of death and reincarnation. These souls were protected, preserved in stasis, held in trust until a new world could be prepared to receive them. That opportunity arose some 75,000 years ago, when Earth reached a stage of readiness for a profound new seeding. The Guardians united two streams of consciousness. First, the emergent souls of Earth's second-density beings, creatures who had recently achieved self-awareness and were ready to begin the trials and lessons of third density. And second, the preserved Martian souls, now given a second chance at life. Through careful genetic refinement, the Martian essence was merged into newly designed human forms, vessels capable of carrying their consciousness forward along the evolutionary path. The Guardians became the architects of humanity itself. They crafted the third-density human body, shaped as we now recognize it, but with deliberate enhancements. The brain was expanded, with particular attention to the left hemisphere, igniting the analytical mind. This gift was far from accidental. It was designed to grant humanity the power of discernment, the ability to reason, and the capacity to exercise free will, tools essential for navigating the complex path of evolution on Earth. Later, around 46,000 years ago, the remaining Martian survivors were also brought to Earth. Unlike the earlier Maldekian seeds, these souls were placed into newly refined human bodies, vessels shaped under the guidance of the Council of Saturn, also known in some traditions as the Galactic Federation of Light. These forms became the foundation of modern humanity, carrying within them the echoes of a lost world, the wisdom of Mars, and the promise of evolution yet to come. After the cataclysm that shattered Mars, countless Martian souls found new incarnations on Earth. These beings, born of the red planet, carried with them a naturally fiery and progressive energy. They were bold, ambitious, and at times aggressive, qualities that had once fueled the wars on their homeworld, ultimately rendering its surface uninhabitable for third-density life. When they transitioned into Earth's third-density cycle, these inherent tendencies and biases accompanied them, coloring the early stages of human civilization. This cycle began nearly 75,000 years ago, according to our current calendar. The first Martian incarnations on Earth concentrated in regions that are now recognized as the Middle East and parts of Africa. From these early settlements emerged populations who would later be identified as the ancestors of the Jewish people, the Palestinians, the Muslims, and other groups of Middle Eastern heritage. As these Martian-descended populations continued their cycles of reincarnation, learning the intricate lessons of love, cooperation, and spiritual growth, they gradually dispersed across the globe. Over time, they became foundational to other human lineages and the spiritual traditions that would shape the world. The Russian and Eastern Orthodox churches, various Christian denominations, and the Protestant branches, though not the Roman Catholic lineage. In all of these peoples, a significant portion of the early souls originally came from Mars. Their fiery energy, ambition, and capacity for leadership left an enduring imprint on the development of human societies, seeding traits of courage, resilience, and innovation that would ripple through history. Around 5.6 million years ago, upon the crimson sands of Mars, a new chapter in the evolution of consciousness began. It was here that the beings who would one day be known as the Luciferian Collective first entered the cycle of incarnation. In those early times, their existence was simple and elemental. Bound initially to the element of fire, they later assumed the forms of plants, learning the quiet lessons of growth, patience, and stillness. As eons passed, they progressed into the animal kingdom, where instinct, movement, and survival became their teachers. Each stage carried them further along the spiral of experience, preparing them for the awakening of self-awareness. Eventually, one soul emerged into third density, the realm of conscious choice and self-recognition. This being was named Lever, a name that would later be whispered by humans as Lucifer. At the dawn of his self-awareness, Lucifer radiated love, compassion, and curiosity. His spirit was deeply aligned with the light, eager to serve, to nurture, and to uplift those around him. But Mars itself became a crucible of conflict. The Martian Wars erupted, tearing the planet apart with violence and chaos. In the midst of this cosmic turmoil, the Elohim Collective reached out to Lucifer, offering the sacred codes of light. They invited him to stand as a beacon, anchoring higher vibration and love amidst the devastation. For a time, he accepted this divine calling, joining the positive forces to safeguard the remnants of his world. Yet over the ages, a profound shift occurred. Lucifer turned from the guidance of the Elohim and chose a path of power, separation, and control. In aligning with these forces, he distanced himself from the light, and his influence contributed to the collapse of Mars. From this divergence arose the first negative social memory complex, a collective consciousness rooted in self-serving thought, fear, and domination. Lucifer and his followers polarized strongly towards service to self, with more than 95% of their energy dedicated to negative alignment. graduating into fourth density as a unified consciousness, they became the first true Luciferian collective, a vast entity devoted to self-interest and the pursuit of power. From their origin on Mars, their influence extended far and wide. They merged with the Anunnaki of Nibiru, entwined with certain gray and reptilian intelligences, and eventually traveled to the Orion star system. There, they allied with advanced negative beings, further amplifying their reach and consolidating their cosmic influence. Thus, the Luciferian collective was born, not a single people, but a convergence of many, drawn from different worlds and galaxies, united by a singular purpose. Across the cosmos, they became recognized as a vast network of negative consciousness, ever working to shape civilizations, guide them toward separation, and perpetuate the path of service to self. About 705,000 years ago, our solar system bore little resemblance to the one we inhabit today. Where the asteroid belt now drifts silently between Mars and Jupiter, there once existed a vibrant and thriving world known as Maldek. The origins of life on Maldek remain shrouded in mystery, yet by roughly 3 million years ago, the planet had already cultivated life across the spectrum, from the elemental first-density forms to stones, plants, animals, and finally to third-density humanoids. Maldek was a super-Earth, a world of vast landscapes and monumental life. Its mountains soared far beyond Everest or even Olympus Mons, and its forests reached heights rivaling the tallest skyscrapers. Even its insects and animals attained staggering proportions. But above all, among its creations walked giants. The Maldekians looked very much like humans in form, but their scale was far beyond anything we know. They stood towering, 70 to 90 feet tall. In the embrace of Maldek's lighter gravity and abundant life force, these beings thrived. Their lifespans stretched 5 times longer than ours, yet their hearts and spirits remained unlike human ones. While they achieved dazzling feats of technology, they neglected the cultivation of inner wisdom. Emotions, compassion, and the pursuit of unity were secondary to the art of invention. And too often, their brilliance was directed toward the creation of weapons of war. Their civilization bore a striking resemblance to the legends we now tell of Atlantis, a society of immense technological mastery, yet lacking restraint and foresight. Much of Maldekian culture gravitated toward what we might call the negative polarity, the path of service to self. And yet, paradoxically, many Maldekians genuinely believed they were acting for the good of all. In their perception, their choices were noble, even selfless. But the reality was catastrophic. Their unchecked ambitions sowed the seeds of their planet's undoing. At that same time, Mars was far from the barren desert we know today. It was a habitable moon of Maldek, vibrant with life and its own population of Martians. Imagine, if you will, Earth's moon alive with thriving civilizations, and you would glimpse the reality of that era. But both Maldek and Mars soon fell under the shadow of an external influence, the Orions. These advanced and power-driven beings, aligned with negative intent, shared with these worlds the secrets of destructive technologies. Under their guidance, tensions escalated, and war erupted between the Maldekians and the Martians, a conflict that would set the stage for the ultimate annihilation of a world. The flourishing civilizations of Mars and Maldek did not go unnoticed in the vastness of the cosmos. they caught the gaze of the Orions and the Draconians, ancient, highly advanced, and intensely negative beings whose ambition was nothing less than the domination of the entire solar system. Their goal was to bend these worlds toward the path of separation and control, to lead them into darkness. These malevolent forces infiltrated Martian and Maldekian societies, subtly at first, then overtly. They shared forbidden knowledge and advanced technologies, weapons of immense destructive power, comparable to nuclear devices, under the guise of progress and enlightenment. But this knowledge was not given for growth or unity. It was a gift designed to fuel conflict, sow division, and escalate the destructive tendencies already present among these civilizations. Under the insidious influence of the Orions, Draconians, and other negative entities, Mars and Maldek were soon engulfed in a series of devastating interplanetary wars and internal civil conflicts. During these battles, the Martians received direct assistance from the Orions, tipping the scales in their favor. Maldek suffered heavily as its cities burned and its natural landscapes were scarred, but this was only the beginning of the planet's downfall. The ultimate catastrophe that shattered Maldek did not come from external invaders alone. It came from within. The Maldekians, driven by pride, ambition, and their untempered technological mastery, turned their brilliance into instruments of self-destruction. In their relentless pursuit of power and dominance, they ignited the final chain of events that tore their world apart, leaving only fragments to drift as the asteroid belt. In this tragic turn, Maldek's demise became a stark testament to the dangers of brilliance untempered by wisdom and the peril of civilizations seduced by the dark path. About 750,000 years ago, the Maldekians had reached the pinnacle of technological mastery, a point where their ingenuity and ambition exceeded all previous limits. They possessed the ability to trigger an event of unimaginable magnitude, an artificially created solar flash. Yet their brilliance was shadowed by hubris, and their unchecked technological use escalated into a war of unprecedented scale. They pushed their weapons to the very edge of possibility, and the consequences were catastrophic. Maldek itself could not withstand the fury of its own children. The planet was torn asunder, shattered beyond repair, leaving only fragments to drift through the void, a grim monument to the peril of untempered power. This cataclysm struck around 705,000 years ago, though life on Maldek had emerged far earlier than on Earth. Their world had nurtured life long before our planet could, offering fertile conditions for the rise of consciousness. Yet when destruction came, the Maldekians were plunged into a profound collective trauma. Their consciousness became ensnared in what might be called a knot of fear, a tightly wound energetic tangle from which no one could reach them for ages. All attempts by outside beings to intervene were met with resistance, as the intensity of their shock created an almost impenetrable barrier. They went through several stages of transition. The first stage of transition began roughly 500,000 years ago. Their collective energy, though still entangled, began to stabilize, a seed of possibility forming within the confines of their trauma. For millennia, it remained inaccessible until approximately 200,000 years ago, when a member of the Confederation succeeded in loosening the knot. The trapped souls of Maldek were gradually released into the inner dimensions, into realms beyond physical time and space. There, they began the slow, painstaking work of healing, reconnecting with the fragments of themselves and regaining the ability to process their past. As their healing progressed, these souls reflected deeply on the consequences of their actions, contemplating the weight of the devastation they had caused. With insight and emerging compassion, they began to make choices to restore balance and to prepare for a new chapter in their evolution. Finally, around 46,000 years ago, these beings made a conscious decision to incarnate on Earth. They entered the planetary sphere, beginning a new cycle of growth within the Neanderthal populations. Here, on Earth, the Maldekians would continue their evolutionary journey, carrying the memory of their past, yet striving toward a higher understanding of love, responsibility, and unity. Around 981,000 years ago, in one of Maldek's earliest timelines, the first forms of what we now call Bigfoot began to emerge. These beings began at the most elemental level of consciousness, first density, where their sole task was to experience and learn the lessons of simple existence. For roughly 1,800 years, they remained in this foundational state, gradually growing in awareness until they evolved into second-density beings, gaining a basic understanding of themselves and the world around them. Yet Maldek was home to civilizations far more advanced than anything humanity has ever known. Its third-density inhabitants wielded technologies of astonishing power, capable of altering matter, energy, and even consciousness itself. In their curiosity and ambition, the Maldekians began to experiment with the creatures of their world, much as humans on Earth experiment with the animals around them. Among these second-density beings were the Bigfoot entities, who became the subjects of these cosmic experiments. One experiment, in particular, changed the course of their existence forever. The Bigfoot beings were infused with enhanced memory, the ability to perceive and interact with the very fabric of space and time, and even the power to move between dimensions. No longer were they ordinary creatures of flesh and instinct. They had become living instruments of immense power, capable of influencing reality itself. When the Maldek War erupted, these enhanced Bigfoots were deployed as formidable soldiers, their extraordinary abilities harnessed for conflict. Yet the war spiraled into devastation, culminating in the catastrophic destruction of Maldek itself. The survivors carried the weight of this tragedy, their consciousness scarred by the loss of their world and the collapse of the society that had created them. After the fall of Maldek, many of these beings sought refuge deep within the hidden recesses of Earth, retreating into cave systems and remote wilderness far from human life. Today, most of them exist primarily in dimensions beyond ordinary perception, stepping into our reality only rarely. When they do appear, it is often for karmic reasons, drawn by unresolved threads from their past. Many still carry the echoes of imbalance and unfinished lessons, returning to Earth to restore harmony through acts of service, connection with their own kind, and the pursuit of self-awareness and spiritual growth.